Jack and his gang stormed into a high school and turned ordinary hallways into a prison. Teenagers and teachers were forced to the floor, hands shaking, breaths held, fear spreading faster than the shouting. In the middle of the chaos stood Catherine, a janitor no one ever noticed. When Jack saw her, he laughed. He ordered her to kneel, dragged his words through the dirt, and humiliated her in front of everyone. To him, she was invisible, weak, harmless. What he didn't know, what no one in that room could have imagined, was that Catherine had once been a highly trained Navy SEAL, respected inside the most elite military circles, a woman who had survived places far more dangerous than a school under siege. As the hours stretched into a nightmare, Catherine stayed quiet and watched. She counted stats, studied voices, memorized routines. While Jack and his men grew careless, she planned. Every breath was controlled, every move had a reason. For 43 hours, she used everything the military had carved into her: discipline, patience, precision to protect the students and teachers without revealing who she really was. And when the moment finally came, the ending was something no one expected, leaving behind questions, shock, and a truth that would change everything. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's understand how this story really began. The linoleum was colder than Catherine expected. It pressed against her cheek with a sterile, institutional chill, carrying the faint chemical bite of bleach that never quite erased the smell of fear. Her left eye stared at the scuffed floor tiles, counting cracks, without moving her head. Above her, weight shifted, rubber sole on polished surface. A boot heel settled deliberately into the narrow space between her shoulder blades and drove down. Not hard enough to cripple, just enough to remind her who owned gravity in the room. She exhaled slowly through her nose. Jack leaned into it. His tactical vest creaked when he moved. Plates too new, straps to clean. The rifle hanging from his sling bobbed with every laugh, the muzzle sweeping the crowd in lazy arcs that made Catherine's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. 300 students filled the gymnasium, tacked shoulder to shoulder on the bleachers and floor. No one crying. Crying would have broken the spell. Instead, breaths were held, shallow and synchronized, a mass of chests barely rising. Jack talked because he needed to hear himself. He called her trash, invisible, a woman who scrubbed toilets on men like him, decided who lived and who died. Spittle landed on the back of her gray uniform, warm against fabric gone thin from years of industrial washing. His voice had a rasp to it, not from age, but from chemistry, amphetamine burn, dehydration. Catherine caught the micro-tremor in his right hand when he adjusted his grip. She noted the slight dilation of his pupils despite the bright overhead lights. Her heart rate stayed low, 48 beats per minute. She could feel each one, spaced and deliberate, like a metronome set by habit rather than fear. While Jack postured, Catherine mapped 6 armed hostiles inside the gym. 2 by the main doors, 1 near the bleachers. 3 roaming the perimeter with no overlapping sectors, their spacing inconsistent. Another 6 elsewhere: hallways, stairwells, exterior access points. She tracked them by sound. Boots on tile, radios chirping, the faint metallic clack of a poorly seated magazine. Their muzzle discipline was atrocious. One of them flagged his own teammate and earned a nervous laugh in response. No command presence, no rehearse ops, contract guns. Jack's boot dug in again, a fraction harder this time. Tain bloomed along her ribs, sharp but clean. Catherine let her fingers curl against the floor, nails scraping just enough to sell the illusion. Her shoulders hunched, her breathing stuttered once, then steadied into something small and frightened. "Get up, garbage," Jack said, nudging her with the barrel of his rifle. "Go clean the toilets, that's all you're good for." He jerked his chin toward the double doors leading into the hallway. His attention was already drifting, pulled by the sound of a radio call he didn't quite understand. The mistake registered in Catherine's mind as a clean, bright line. She rose slowly, vertebra by vertebra, keeping her eyes down. She let her hands shake, a controlled tremor starting at the fingers. Her shoulders sagged as if the weight of the room pressed there instead of in her memory. When she turned toward the doors, she felt the air change, felt the boundary where the gymnasium ended and something else began, the school disappear. In its place, walls sharpened, angles clarify. Distances measured themselves automatically. The echoes of Jack's laughter flattened into irrelevant noise. What remained was geometry, timing, and mass. A kill house, the doors opened, she stepped through. Behind her, the metal clicked shut, soft and final. Catherine's spine aligned, subtle but absolute, as if an internal switch had been thrown. Her hands stopped shaking, her breath settled into a 4-count rhythm she hadn't consciously used in years. Somewhere deep beneath the gray uniform and lower gaze, training locked into place. The operation had gone live. The instant the gym door sealed behind her, the performance ended. The tremor drained from Catherine's hands as if someone had cut a wire. Her shoulders rolled back a fraction of an inch, vertebrae stacking with quiet precision. Muscle memory took over, subtle and absolute. The woman who had shuffled under a rifle barrel no longer existed. Her center of gravity shifted forward, balanced, ready. A weapon doesn't announce itself when it locks into place, it simply is. The hallway stretched ahead, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Terrazzo flooring reflected dull-shaped lockers, trophy cases, emergency signage, but her shoes made no sound against it. Soft solace, deliberate foot placement, heel barely touching before weight transferred to the ball of her foot. She didn't glance toward the restrooms. That would have been expected, predictable. She turned north. Each step was measured, timed between the distant cadence of boots and the intermittent crackle of radios bleeding through cinderblock walls. Her breathing settled into a controlled pattern, shallow but efficient. In through the nose, out through pursed lips. The faint ache in her ribs from Jack's boot registered, then disappeared into the background like old static. The custodian's closet door in the north wing looked no different from any other off-white paint, dented handle, a faded safety placard curling at the edges. Catherine slipped inside and closed it without a click. Darkness enveloped her for half a second before her eyes adjusted. She bypassed the obvious. Mops leaned in plastic buckets. Industrial cleaner sat half-empty on a metal shelf. Instead, she moved to the back wall and pressed her fingers against a section of drywall that didn't flex like the rest. Her thumb found the seam she'd cut years ago, hidden beneath a strip of paint matched by hand. 3 years earlier. Different life. Same contingency planning. The panel slid aside just enough. Her fingers wrapped around a hard polymer case, cool to the touch. She drew it out and set it on the floor, opening it with practiced economy. No hesitation, no reverence, no firearm. That had been a line she'd never crossed. Bringing a gun onto a school campus, even concealed, even just in case, would have meant admitting she expected this. That she had planned for children to become collateral. Her code was rigid that way, unforgiving. Instead, steel and electronics. A Kabar combat knife rested in molded foam, its edge clean, its weight familiar enough that her hand adjusted instinctively. Next to it sat a compact tactical radio jammer, scuffed from use, modified beyond factory specs. She clipped the knife inside her waistband, angled for a reverse draw, then palmed the jammer, thumb brushing the activation switch without engaging it. Her watch vibrated once against her wrist. She glanced down. 12 minutes since breach. Golden hour wasn't just a medical term, it was a window. A shrinking envelope of time before chaos calcified into outcome. Before negotiations failed. Before someone made an irreversible decision. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy tread, flat-footed, the rhythm lacked intent. No pause at intersections, no skin maintains. Whoever it was trusted the nose of his boots more than his eyes. A sentry. Catherine melted into the narrow slice of shadow behind the doorframe, muscles relaxing instead of cooling. Stillness wasn't the absence of movement, it was control over it. She slowed her breathing further, matching the tempo of the footsteps until they overlapped. The man passed the doorway, head tilted down, phone glowing faintly in his hand. His rifle hung loose, sling twisted, a message scrolled across his screen. He smiled at it, the corner of his mouth lifting. That was when she moved. Her forearm slid under his chin, bicep locking tight as her other hand guided his head back. No wasted force, no nose. Her hips rotated, aligning her center line with his. Pressure applied precisely to the carotid arteries, not the trachea, blood flow interrupted without crushing cartilage. 6 seconds, his smile vanished, his phone slipped from his fingers and clattered once against the floor before she caught it with her foot. His body went slack, weight sagging into her. She controlled the descent, easing him down so his skull never touched the tile. Unconscious, alive, she dragged him into the closet, movements efficient, impersonal. Zip ties snapped tight around wrists and ankles, plastic biting into fabric. She rolled him onto his side to maintain an open airway, then stripped the radio from his vest, testing the weight in her palm. It crackled softly as she adjusted the volume. Voices, panic masked as bravado. Overlapping calls, no discipline. Catherine closed her eyes for half a heartbeat. Listening. Now she had their comms. The radio hissed alive in her ear, and with it came disorder. Voices bled over one another, clipped sentences colliding mid-transmission. Someone shouted a grid reference that meant nothing without a map. Another demanded confirmation no one answered. A third laughed too loud, too sharp, then went quiet. There was no cadence to it, no hierarchy asserting itself, no one saying stand by and being obeyed. Catherine listened without moving, head angled slightly as if sound itself had weight. Her thumb adjusted the volume by millimeters. She didn't need clarity, she needed pattern. There wasn't one. Unprofessional diction, emotional leakage in every syllable. No brevity codes, no check-ins on a fixed interval. These weren't ideologues rehearsed on doctrine. They were PMC's men who rented their skill the way others rented tools. Loyalty terminated at the wire transfer that made them volatile. Her jaw set, the muscles along her neck tightening once before relaxing again. 12 armed men, automatic weapons, interior environment filled with non-combatants. A frontal engagement would be a massacre, and not in her favor. She didn't need to win a fight. She needed to erase their ability to make decisions, observe, orient, decide, act. She could break that chain. Catherine moved, keeping close to the walls, eyes flicking to convex mirrors and shadow intersections. She reached the boiler room without incident. The air inside was warmer, heavier, carrying the metallic tang of old pipes and stagnant water. The low rumble of the system vibrated faintly through the solace of her shoes. She crossed to the breaker panel and knelt, rolling her shoulders once to loosen tension. Her fingers traced labels she already knew by memory. She didn't throw the main. That would have been crude, obvious. Instead, she isolated circuits with surgical precision. Gymnasium lighting, corridor banks, administrative wing, emergency system stayed lev. She flipped a final switch. The building exhaled. Overhead lights died in sections, plunging hallways into a dim, uneven glow as emergency fixtures kicked in. Shadows lengthened, corners thickening into blind spots. In the gym, the sudden shift pulled gasps from hundreds of throats at once. The radios exploded. What the hell just happened? Power's out. No, not all of it. Who cut power? Jack's voice cut through, sharp and high, the edge of control already fraying. Status. I want status right now. Catherine didn't react outwardly. She was already moving again. She accessed the PA system from a side panel, hands steady as she rerouted output zones. She didn't trigger alarms, didn't call law enforcement, didn't introduce a human voice that could be traced or challenged. Instead, she injected sound, a high-frequency feedback loop, narrowly banded, tuned to resonate in enclosed corridors where the patrols moved. It wouldn't register as volume so much as pressure, a vibration behind the eyes. A crawling sensation at the base of the skull. She activated it. Men staggered in the hallways, hands flying to helmets that suddenly felt too tight. One dropped to a knee, retching. Another slammed a fist into the wall, teeth clenched, eyes squeezed shut as if that could stop the sensation. Their radios filled with static and profanity. What is that? My head, Jesus, make it stop. Catherine watched from behind a classroom door window, her reflection faint in the glass. Her face remained neutral, eyes cold and focused. She noted their reactions the way a physician noted symptoms. Balance compromised, communication degraded, orientation slipping. One by one, they drifted from formation, seeking relief, space, silence. She let them. She moved through the building like a rumor never, or they expected, always just out of phase with their awareness. Doors closed behind her, intersections cleared. The sound fed on itself, amplifying fear, compressing time. Then she reached the principal's office. The monitors glowed in the dim room, a patchwork of camera feeds. Catherine stepped closer, her breath slowing as she scanned them. The gym feed showed chaos contained only by rifles and shouting, but the others, her fingers stilled. Hallway C, Librarian X, a small office near the lockers. Students weren't just being guarded, they were being pulled aside. Singled out, moved, her eyes narrowed, a barely perceptible contraction at the corners. This wasn't a standoff, it was a selection process. Catherine leaned closer to the monitor bank, one hand braced on the edge of the desk, the other hovering just short of the controls. The cameras were low resolution, lagging by a fraction of a second, but enough, more than enough. She adjusted the zoom, the image tightened, pixels sharpening around movement in the gym. Jack stood out immediately, not by competence, but by force. He was dragging a girl from the mass of students, fingers locked around her upper arm with proprietary certainty. He paused every few steps, pulling a phone from his vest, glancing down at the screen, then back at her face. Check, compare, confirm. The girl stumbled once. Jack yanked her upright without slowing. Sarah, 16, Library 8. Catherine knew the type before the data finished assembling in her head. Not loud. Not defiant, useful, the kind adults overlooked until they needed something done quietly and correctly. Sarah's shoulders were rigid, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone pale. She didn't scream. Her jaw trembled once, then locked, not random. Catherine felt it before she understood. Did a sudden constriction behind her sternum, sharp enough to steal half a breath. Her fingers curled slightly against the desk, nails pressing into laminate. She leaned closer to the screen, eyes tracking the girl's face as Jack shoved her toward the exit corridor. Bone structure, the set of the eyes. The way she held herself under pressure, familiar. Catherine swallowed, the movement small, but deliberate, and reached for the radio. Her thumb rotated the dial, switching frequencies, with muscle memory older than the building around her. Jack's voice came through clean this time, stripped of bluster, lowered into something transactional. "Package secured," he said. There was a pause. A reply too faint to make out. "The senator will pay anything to retrieve his illegitimate daughter." Jack continued. "We move in 1 hour." The word daughter landed like a controlled detonation. Catherine went utterly still, no breath, no blink. Even the low hum of the monitor seemed to recede, as if the room itself were waiting for her to move. Her pulse, steady moments earlier, ticked up by a handful of beats, not panic, but recalibration. This wasn't terrorism. There was no manifesto, no demands, no ideological objective. This was extraction. The students in the gym weren't leverage, they were concealment. Human terrain used to mask a targeted retrieval until deniability could be established and evidence erased. Camouflage. Catherine's eyes flicked to the timestamp on the monitor, then to her watch. The digits glowed back at her, indifferent. Less than 60 minutes. Cleanup would follow the same logic as the breach: fast, brutal, and permanent. Witnesses neutralized, narrative controlled. By the time anyone external realized what had happened, the truth would already be buried under official statements and sealed reports. She exhaled slowly through her nose, forcing air back into lungs that had locked themselves down. The shape of the mission in her head warped, edges shifting, priorities snapping into a new alignment. Protect students, neutralize hostiles, prevent extraction. Primary objective. Sarah. Catherine stepped away from the monitors and moved with purpose now, the last remnants of hesitation burned off by clarity. She entered the maintenance supply room adjacent to the boiler corridor and scanned shelves with a quick, practiced eye. Her hand closed around a bottle of ammonia, then bleach. She pulled duct tape from a hook, the roll heavy and reassuring in her palm. Improvise doesn't mean careless. Before she touched a single container, she rerouted airflow, climbing a short ladder to access the HVAC intake controls feeding the gymnasium. Her fingers worked fast, sealing vents with what she had, isolating circulation paths. The gym would stay clean. The students would breathe. Then she moved east. She popped open a secondary access panel near the east wing, exposing ductwork and a junction box. She adjusted dampers, redirected flow, and marked her own mental map with invisible ink. When she finally set the containers down, spacing them carefully, her expression never changed. Controlled, localized. This wasn't desperation, it was warfare, adapted on the fly. The first sign wasn't the smell, it was the silence. To check-in windows passed without response, radios chirped, then fell dead. Jack stood near the center of the gym, jaw working as he pressed his earpiece harder against his skull, as if force could pull answers out of static. His left eye twitched once, then again. Alpha 2, report. He snapped. Nothing. He switched channels. His thumb jabbed the button harder than necessary. East Wing. Sound off. Now. The reply came back as a wash of interference, broken syllables dissolving into white noise. Jack's grip tightened around his rifle. The veins in his forearm stood out, corded and pale beneath the skin. Then the air shifted. Not smoke, not fire, something sharper. A chemical bite that scraped the back of the throat before the brain could name it. Eyes stunned, lungs recoiled. Men closest to the east hallway staggered, coughing hard enough to fold at the waist, hands clawing at their necks as if something invisible had wrapped itself there. Chloramine. It rolled low and fast, a pale bloom hugging the floor before rising, seeping into every breath. Non-lethal, I design, but engineered to trigger panic. Mucous membranes inflamed, vision blurred, nausea immediate. A weapon that didn't kill, but convinced the body was dying. What the hell? One of the mercenaries choked, dropping to a knee. My eyes. Another retched, helmet clanging against the bleachers as he tried to rip it off. Rifles slipped from hands gone clumsy. Men pushed back toward the gym in disorganized waves, boots skidding on polished floor, coughing turning into gagging. Gas. They've got gas. Someone screamed. The word detonated. Students broke. The collective restraint shattered as fear surged through the crowd. Screams tore loose, high and raw. Bodies pressed inward, away from the spreading haze, hands flying to mouths and faces. A girl collapsed, hyperventilating, fingers locked into her own hair. Jack spun in a tight circle, eyes wild now, pupils blown wide. He raised his rifle and fired into the ceiling. The report cracked like thunder, plaster rained down. The echo slammed through the gym, forcing silence by sheer violence. Shut up, he roared. Observe as authority disintegrated in his voice. Everyone shut up. He seized Sarah by the collar and yanked her against his chest. The pistol came up fast, pressed hard beneath her jaw. She froze, breath hitching, her hands hovering uselessly at her sides. Her eyes darted once, then fixed straight ahead, glassy but unblinking. I know you're out there. Jack shouted, voice pitching high as he scanned the rafters, the doors, the shadows. Sweat streaked down his temple, cutting clean lines through grime. You think this is clever? You think you're in control? Above him, unseen, Catherine watched through the narrow slats of a ventilation grate. Her face was still, eyes steady. The chaos below registered as data angles, distances, vectors of movement. She tracked Jack's grip on the pistol, the tension in his trigger finger, the way Sarah's throat moved as she swallowed against cold metal. No firearm, she hadn't needed one. Her hand rested on the knife's grip, fingers relaxed, thumb brushing the textured pommel. She calculated without visible effort, drop distance, mass, force multiplication. The angle required to neutralize Jack without transferring lethal energy to the girl in his arms. Physics didn't care about fear, it only cared about timing. Catherine inhaled once, deep and controlled, and shifted her weight forward by a fraction of an inch. Catherine eased back from the grate, muscles coiling down rather than up, storing tension without letting it leak. Jack's voice still echoed through the gym, fractured by panic and authority slipping out of his grasp. Sarah's pulse beat visibly at her throat, a rapid flutter beneath Jack's forearm. Catherine catalogued it, then set it aside. She needed confirmation, not backup. Not cavalry, eyes. She slid along the ductwork until her boots found stable footing, then dropped soundlessly into the maintenance corridor below. Her left hand went to her ankle, fingers slipping beneath the cuff of her pant leg. The holster strap yielded with a muted snap, and she drew out a satellite phone that looked older than the building's scratch casing. Dulled antenna, the kind of device that survived deserts and saltwater because it had been designed to, encrypted, off-grid, invisible to anything civilian. She thumbed it on. One ring, no menu, no preamble. Pentagon watch floor, the voice was clipped, professional, stripped of inflection. Catherine brought the phone closer, angling her body toward the wall as if the concrete could absorb sound. Auth code Sierra Tango 39er, she said. A half-beat pause. Wraith. The line went silent. Not dead. Listening, Catherine's jaw tightened slightly, the only outward sign of the calculus running behind her eyes. She waited, breath shallow, shoulders squared. The sounds of chaos beyond the wall, screams, coughing, shouted orders bled through faintly, like noise from another world. "You're listed, Mia," the voice said at last. "Officially," Catherine replied. Her tone didn't change, situation critical. She spoke in compressed bursts, feeding information the way she always had: facts first, context second. Hostile count, weapons, layout, chemical dispersal, high-value extraction, target identify. Civilian density extreme, timeline under 60 minutes. She didn't justify, she didn't plead. There was a pause on the other end, longer this time. Catherine pictured a room she hadn't seen in years, banks of monitors, subdued lighting, analysts leaning in, someone with authority pressing a finger to their lips. The reply came back colder than silence. "No support," the voice said. "Local swap compromised. Senator's security detail is inside the building. Cleanup has been ordered." Each phrase landed cleanly, deliberately, like rounds seated in a magazine. Catherine's fingers tightened around the phone, not enough to shake, just enough to register pressure. Her gaze dropped to the floor, unfocused, as if she were looking through layers of concrete and memory. Cleanup, that meant bodies. Statements drafted in advance, evidence classified. A narrative already written. She closed her eyes. For half a second, the weight of it pressed down every op that ended this way, every promise made quietly and broken officially. Her breathing slowed, forced into compliance by habit older than regret. When she opened her eyes again, they were clear. "Understood," she said. The line went dead. Catherine lowered the phone and slid it back into the holster, securing the strap with a practiced tug. She stood there for a moment longer, listening to the building breathe, to the distant crack of Jack's voice unraveling further. No cavalry, no extraction team, no airspace clearance, just her. Alone inside a sealed building with armed men, terrified children, and a clock that didn't care about intent. Her shoulders settled, her spine straightened. If this ended, it would end on her terms. The truth settled into place with brutal clarity. Jack wasn't freelance muscle, not really. His movements made sense now, the confidence bordering on arrogance, the way he spoke over the radio as if answers were owed to him, not negotiated. The absence of fear when plans shifted. He wasn't worried about extraction because extraction had already been guaranteed. He was protected, family to the system. Catherine felt it as a tightening beneath her ribs, not anger, not surprise, recognition. She had seen this pattern before. Men who weren't expendable because their silence was valuable. Men whose loyalty had been purchased long ago and amortized across favors, deniability, and blood. Her jaw set. A muscle jumped once along her cheek, then went still. She moved. The main security control room sat behind reinforced glass near the administrative wing, its keypad obsolete, but functional. Catherine forced the door with a pry bar she had cached years earlier for emergencies no one else planned for. Inside, status lights blinked calmly. Unaware of the lives balanced on their circuits, she went straight to the manual override. Automated systems could be spoofed, network controls could be cut. Steel couldn't. Her fingers flew across the panel, entering sequences she had memorized after weeks of quiet observation during night shifts no one questioned. The mechanisms answered with a low, resonant thud that vibrated through the walls, first perimeter doors, then secondary exits, then the fire lanes. Outside, steel plates slid down on hydraulic rails, locking into place with the finality of a vault ceiling shut. Emergency egress indicators flipped from green to red. Somewhere deep in the building, motors whined as the last of the fail-safes disengaged. No alarm sounded. This wasn't evacuation. This was containment. Jack felt it immediately. He staggered as the pressure differential shifted, eyes snapping to the exits just as the final plate slammed into place. The sound rolled through the gym like distant thunder. He pulled Sarah tighter against him, her breath hitching as the building itself seemed to close its jaws. "What did you do?" he shouted, voice cracking as he hammered the radio again. "Command, do you read me?" Static, non-interference, absence, men tested doors. Rifles banged uselessly against reinforced steel. A fist struck a plate hard enough to draw blood. Panic crept into their movements now, sharp and uncontrolled. Jack's nostrils flared as he realized what the silence meant. No one was coming. Catherine keyed the PA with a single motion. Her voice carried evenly through the gym and amplified by emotion, stripped down to fact. "You're trapped in here with me." Jack spun, eyes scanning upward, wild now, searching for a face, a shape, a target. His finger tightened on the trigger. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear cutting a clean line down her cheek. Above them, unseen, Catherine watched the effect ripple upward. She noted the way Jack's shoulders hunched, how his breathing shortened despite the adrenaline. She saw the micro delay between his thoughts and his movements, the first fracture in certainty. She had removed his safety net. No extraction, no cleanup, no family left to shield him. Only walls, time, and consequences. Catherine shifted her weight, already planning the next move as the building settled into its new state, sealed, silent, and irrevocably off the board. Minute 40 to bled into 43 without ceremony. Time didn't announce itself, it manifested in micro-failures. A mercenary wiped sweat from his eyes and forgot to bring his rifle back up. Another leaned a shoulder against the wall for half a second too long, chest heaving, mouth open as his body tried to pull oxygen through irritation-scorched lungs. Adrenaline burned hot, then uneven. Hands trembled when they should have been steady. Fatigue had arrived. Catherine felt it to an ache in the calves, the faint drag behind her eyes, but it stayed compartmentalized, boxed and shelved. She moved with the same cadence she had at minute 1, because slowing was a choice, and she hadn't made it. She tracked Charlie 1 through the ceiling void above the science wing, boots balanced on crossbeams, fingers testing each tile before committing weight. Below her, his steps were uneven now. He paused often, listened too long. His radio squawked with nothing useful, and he flinched every time. She found the weak point in the grid and waited until he stopped directly beneath it. Then she dropped. The tile gave way with a single muted crack. Catherine fell through the opening feet first, rotated midair, and struck him before his brain could register the threat. Her knee drove into his clavicle, her elbow followed, precise, collapsing the brachial plexus. He went down hard, breath exploding from his lungs and a wet gasp. She didn't finish him with the knife, she took his weapon. The MP5 came free from his sling with a practiced tug. German engineering, compact. Familiar recoil profile. She checked the chamber by feel, then stripped the magazines from his vest. 3. She slid them into place, the weight settling against her spine like an old acquaintance. The math ran itself round count, failure rate, margin for error. Every round mattered. She vanished again before anyone came running. The building became a grid in her mind, each corridor a vector, each room a possibility. She moved laterally, vertically, unpredictably. She struck where panic had already softened defenses, a flash of movement at the edge of vision. A shape in the dark, then silence. Bodies appeared. One slumped against a locker bank, eyes open, expression frozen in confusion. Another lay face down near the stairwell, blood seeping slowly beneath him. A single word smeared across the tile by a fingertip dipped in red. "Leave her," the message repeated elsewhere, on a wall, on a door. Letters uneven, hurried, but unmistakable. Jack saw the first body and felt something break, his jaw clenched so hard it creaked. He kicked the corpse once, as if it might answer him. His breathing came fast now, sharp inhales through flared nostrils, exhalations forced. He screamed into the radio, then hurled it across the gym when nothing answered back. "Find her," he shouted at no one in particular. "She's playing you. Move." But they didn't move the way he wanted. They clustered, back to back, rifles swinging to Y. Trust eroding with every second. The PA crackled to life. Catherine's voice cut through the gym, calm and unhurried, stripped of threat because it didn't need it. "I'm the janitor." The words landed wrong. Too ordinary, too close. Jack spun in a slow circle, muzzle tracking shadows that no longer held shape. His lips parted, searching for something to say, something that would restore hierarchy. The lights died. Emergency illumination blinked once, then went dark. The gym fell into absolute black, punctured only by the faint glow of exit signs Catherine had left active on purpose. Enough to see silhouettes, enough to aim poorly. Night vision clicked on across the room, cheap units, lagging, grainy. Catherine's didn't. She moved. The world reassembled itself in green. Night vision washed the gym in phosphorescent grain, depth flattened, edges bleeding into one another. Figures became silhouettes, motion clarify, but detail vanished. Cheap units whined faintly as Otto Gain fought shadows it didn't understand. A mercenary lifted his rifle and the image bloomed white, sensor overwhelmed, leaving him half-blind at the worst possible moment. Catherine's view stayed stable, her optics adjusted without lag, contrast resolving cleanly. She moved low and lateral, boots whispering across the floor, timing her steps to the uneven breathing of the men she passed. One of them turned to late. She struck him with the butt of the MP5, driving it into the base of his skull. He folded without a sound, knees clarified just before they hit. Another caught a glimpse of her and fired. Round snapped past, supersonic cracks ripping the air where her head had been a fraction was second earlier. Catherine dropped, rolled, came up behind a row of bleachers. She fired once, controlled. The recoil nudged her shoulder, familiar and manageable. The man spun and collapsed, night vision flaring white as his body hit the floor. 3 down. She didn't count them aloud. The number registered and moved aside, filed away for later. Her focus tunneled forward, toward the only variable that still mattered. Jack, he had Sarah again, arm locked tight around her collarbone, pistol pressed hard against her temple now. His breathing was ragged, chest jerking beneath his vest. Sweat soaked the padding, glistening under fall screen light. His finger twitched against the trigger, pressured building in uneven pulses. "Don't," he shouted, though no one was advancing. "I swear to God." Sarah's hands were clenched into fists at her sides, nails biting into her palms. Her breath came shallow, controlled only by effort. She didn't cry out. Her eyes tracked something above Jack's shoulder, wide but focused, as if she sensed where the danger really was. Jack squeezed, the trigger moved, Catherine fired at the same instant, not at him. The round punched into the red fire extinguisher mounted on the wall behind Jack, steel ruptured. Pressurized contents exploded outward in a violent white cloud, powder and gas detonating into the space between them. White chaos. The blast swallowed sound and sight at once. Night vision units flared to pure static, sensors overloaded, displays washing out completely. Men screamed, blind now, disoriented, weapons firing wildly into nothing. Jack stumbled, coughing hard as the chemical cloud filled his lungs. His grip loosened just enough. Catherine was already moving. She cut through the cloud like a shadow, mask tight to her face. I shielded. Her shoulder drove into Jack's chest, separating him from Sarah with controlled force. Sarah fell backward, scrambling away on hands and knees, choking but alive. Jack swung the pistol blindly. Catherine trapped his wrist, torque snapping through the joint. The gun clattered across the floor, lost in the powder. The white cloud continued to expand, erasing distance, erasing certainty. Footsteps thundered and then stopped abruptly. Someone retched, someone prayed. Catherine stayed inside the chaos, breathing steady, heart rate locked down by habit and training. This was where she functioned best when the environment collapsed and only mechanics remained. When the cloud began to thin, Jack was on his knees, coughing, one hand clutching his ruined wrist, eyes red and streaming. Catherine stood in front of him, weapon leveled, posture unyielding. The distance between them closed to nothing. The blade entered high and precise, just below the clavicle, angling inward, not a wild strike. Not rage, training. Steel slid through muscle and found the nerve cluster with surgical certainty. Jack's arm went slack before his mind could register pain. His weapon clattered against the concrete, echoing one sharp, final. His knees buckled. He tried to breathe, but the command never reached his lungs. The signal was gone. Jack fell. The room froze in a fraction of a second that felt stretched thin, like glass under pressure. Dust hung in the air from shattered drywall. Emergency lights strobed red, then white, then red again, painting faces in fragments. Jack lay on his side, mouth opening and closing. His good eye tracked upward, locking onto the woman standing over him. Her grip on the knife was relaxed, almost negligent. No tremor, no hesitation. Her pulse barely shifted. "Who are you?" he rasped. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth, each breath wetter than the last. She didn't rush the answer. She withdrew the blade in a clean line and wiped it once against his jacket, avoiding the cameras still blinking on the walls. "I take out the trash," boots thundered from the corridor. Commands barked clear, disciplined, state troopers moving in stack formation. Muzzles cut through the haze. Someone shouted for medics. Someone else called in a suspect down. One in custody, one neutralized. But Catherine was already stepping back, blending into the collapse she had engineered. Her posture shifted, shoulders rounding just enough to look like another survivor instead of the architect. Sarah broke free from the troopers at the doorway. Her breath hitched once, sharp and silent, before she ran. She dropped to her knees beside Catherine, hands hovering for half a second before making contact, fingers digging into fabric as if confirming something solid still existed. "You came for me," the words cracked on the way out. Sarah's jaw tightened immediately after, forcing control back into place, but her eyes betrayed it wet. "Why? Searching." Catherine looked at her then. Really looked. The hard line in her face softened by a degree no one else would notice. Her gloved hand rose and squeezed Sarah's forearm once. Firm, anchoring, always. Sirens grew louder, radios chirped. The troopers secured the perimeter, unaware that the most dangerous person in the room was already disengaging. Catherine stood, turning as if guided by procedure rather than instinct, and began to walk away. That was when the cameras caught it. A tilt of the head, a brief glance over her shoulder. The light hit her face cleanly for the first time. Same eyes, same blood. The resemblance was undeniable now, stripped bare by fluorescent truth. Analysts would freeze the frame later, enhance, compare. They would argue about timelines, about disappearances, about why no record had ever surfaced, but the truth was simpler. She hadn't been hiding, she'd been watching. Learning patterns, mapping enemies, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be enough. As Catherine disappeared beyond the troopers and into the chaos outside, the machinery of consequence began to turn. Investigations would open, files would be unsealed. Lines long buried would be redrawn in ink and fire. And somewhere, far from the sirens and the blood, a quiet war shifted from preparation to execution. If you want to see how it continues, subscribe to the channel and stay with us.